Your website is one of your most critical book marketing assets. Your website's where you manage your reputation online. It's where you grow your email list. It's where you sell books directly to readers one day, and is often the first point of contact with the media, and so much more. But for a website to exist, it needs to have a server to host it. There are thousands of competing hosting options out there, which can feel a bit overwhelming. So what kind of web host do you need for your website? Well, find out in this episode of Novel Marketing, the longest running book marketing podcast in the world. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr., CEO of Author Media, and this is the show for writers who want to make a living writing books worth talking about. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast by clicking follow in the podcast app on your phone or clicking subscribe on our new YouTube channel. Before we talk about the different kinds of hosting, we need to first talk about what hosting is. A web host is the company that maintains the computers that serve your website to visitors. I don't want to get too complicated, but these computers are called servers, and maintaining a server requires constant security, updates, electricity, bandwidth, and maintenance. So for authors who ask why they have to pay for web hosting, this is the answer. All of that costs money. Which brings us to the first kind of hosting, which is free hosting. I don't recommend free hosting for authors. Free hosting typically has poor or no customer support because you are the product being sold to advertisers, or your visitors are the product being sold to advertisers. And one of the biggest problems when it comes to free hosting is that you don't control what kind of ads get placed on your website. And if they're offensive or inappropriate or just spammy, there's nothing you can do. Free hosts typically make money either with advertising that you have little or no control over and often can't see, because if the host sees that you're logged in, often it won't show the ads to you. And they also make money selling your data or your visitors' data. And free hosts make money charging you money. Most free hosts aren't nearly as free as they appear. So I recommend avoiding free hosts, and this includes WordPress.com. So people often hear me recommend WordPress, and I do recommend WordPress. I think WordPress is what pretty much all authors should use, but not the WordPress.com version. You want to use real WordPress, which is WordPress.org, hosted on a real paid-for web host. So if you're in a situation where free hosting is the only option, I really recommend getting a job and becoming a customer. Don't be the product sold. Corporate communism is not the path to prosperity. Become the customer and everything will be different. So with that said, let's talk about proprietary hosting. This is the alternative to WordPress. And the most famous proprietary hosts are Wix, Weebly, and Squarespace. And the problem with these hosts is many. The first is lock-in. If you're unhappy with your hosting and you want to move, you have to completely rebuild your website from scratch on the new platform. You can't move a Wix website to Bluehost, for instance. There's also a lot of hidden limitations. With proprietary websites, you have to use their generic solution that they provide. Wix can't run WordPress plugins. So if you want to put My Book Table on your website, or My Book Progress, or many of the other specifically for authors plugins, you can't. You have to use the generic ones that Wix provides or that Squarespace provides. And Wix can't use Squarespace plugins and vice versa. So you're really locked into a very limited ecosystem. And authors just getting started often can't see these limitations. And so Wix or Weebly or Squarespace or whatever seems really easy. And it is easy to get started very quickly. But eventually you hit one of those limitations, which ends up resulting in rebuilding everything from scratch in WordPress. Wix is a lot like a hamster. A lot of authors had a Wix website. Very few authors have a Wix website. So if you want to start with Wix, that's fine, but just realize you'll be moving away at some point. Pretty much all professional authors end up on WordPress eventually. So my recommendation is to go with a host that uses standard WordPress.org software. This is the software that the vast majority of websites run on across the whole internet. Something like 60 or 70% of all websites run on WordPress, and the other 30% are split amongst thousands of proprietary hosts. And I definitely recommend that you avoid a proprietary host that I haven't mentioned. Proprietary hosts that lock you into their software instead of using the industry standard WordPress software. It creates something that we in the industry call the golden handcuffs, where you get the handcuffs and the host gets the gold because you're locked in. That's no good. I'm too much of a Texan to believe in handcuffs, even if they are made out of gold, and especially if they're made out of my gold. So I recommend that you pay for hosting, which leads us to shared hosting. This is the cheapest and most common form of WordPress hosting. And for novelists, this is often the best pick. For nonfiction bloggers with the chance of going viral, you may want to pay for more expensive hosting. But even for most nonfiction authors, I think this is where you should get started. The typical author just doesn't get enough traffic to justify spending more than what you would pay for to get your kind of basic shared hosting. The main thing to realize with shared hosting is that the host will lose money on you at first. So it costs more than $5 a month to host a decent website. And so if you get introductory pricing at $5 a month or less, realize they're going to need to raise their prices on you eventually to recoup their losses. So if the deals are constantly changing, but if you have a chance to lock in an introductory price for a long time, I recommend that you take it. Bluehost has a 3-year hosting plan, for example, that allows you to lock in a pretty good introductory price for 3 years. That's way better than having a price for 3 years that then doubles or triples. The typical ongoing price for shared hosting is around $15 a month. So whatever your introductory price is, $15 a month is where most shared hosts can actually make a profit hosting your website. This is the slowest hosting option. This is probably the biggest con of shared hosting. But for most novelists, you don't need a lot of speed for your website. It is important, but there's a lot of factors that affect how fast your website runs. And I have an entire episode on it that you can listen to called How to Speed Up Your Author Website. And yes, spending more money on a more expensive host can speed up your website, but your website can still run slow on an expensive host, and it can run fast on Bluehost. It's just one factor. Some authors will complain about a various shared host or another. So some will complain about Bluehost or DreamHost or one of the others. And in most cases, the issue isn't actually with the hosting. They're just blaming the host because that's who they called for support. But really, the issue is with how the website was set up in the first place. So I recommend having a webmaster that you can pay to get unstuck from technical binds. Somebody who can help with the design of the website and not just the hosting of the website. This is particularly true if you built your website yourself. Sometimes just an hour or two of work from a savvy webmaster can save you from years of frustration. And we have a lot of savvy webmasters on our job board at authormedia.social. The more icons they have next to their name, the more of my courses they've taken, and the savvier they're likely to be. But if you're still having issues, remember that this is the cheapest option. So don't expect steakhouse quality at McDonald's. Now, that said, one of the things I really like about WordPress is that you can move to a new host. And if you're unhappy with your current host and want to move, the process is pretty straightforward, and it gives you a chance to lock in that introductory pricing for a new shared host. And so for some authors, they just go back and forth from shared host to lock in the introductory pricing. And this can work, but remember, your time is valuable. So while it is easy to move from host to host, there's still some work to it. And so I'd only do it if it actually makes sense, or if you're legitimately unhappy with your host, whoever it is. So the two shared hosting companies that I recommend are Bluehost and DreamHost. There's a bunch of good ones out there, but I do recommend that you avoid GoDaddy and Namecheap for your web hosting. The next kind of hosting is managed hosting, or it's sometimes called cloud hosting. And this is what I use for my websites. It's better in pretty much every way. and it's more expensive. So you get what you pay for when it comes to hosting. Companies like Facebook and Google will spend millions and millions of dollars on hosting. So hosting can be very expensive. So $5 a month is just the beginning price. If you have the potential of going viral, or if you're already more established as an author and you're getting lots of traffic to your website, or if you're a big-time podcaster or just have more robust needs for your website, you may consider switching to managed hosting or cloud hosting. And Bluehost has a version of this. Bluehost calls it cloud hosting. I personally use WP Engine, which calls it managed hosting, but they're very, very similar, just different marketing terms. So some of the pros of managed hosting is that it scales to lots of traffic. It's very secure and it's very fast. And when I talk about scaling, let me explain what I mean by that. So my personal blog, thomasumstadt.com, doesn't get a lot of traffic. I don't blog there very often. It goes many months with no updates whatsoever. But one time I wrote a blog post that went viral, and I went from getting a few hundred visits or maybe a few thousand visits a month to, in the course of 3.5 weeks, getting 1 million visits to my website. And because I was with managed hosting on WP Engine, my website was just as fast on the day when I got 100,000 visits in one day as it was on any of the other days. In fact, if anything, it was faster when I was getting that much traffic because of all of the advanced caching that WP Engine does at various points in the tech stack. Again, I'm trying not to be too technical here, but there are some technical reasons to go with managed hosting. And really the only con of managed hosting is that it's more expensive. WP Engine's managed hosting starts at $20 a month. Bluehost's cloud hosting starts around $30 a month. Again, the prices are always in flux and there's always sales and whatnot going on. But it's not uncommon for managed hosting to, after a while, start costing $50 a month or $100 a month or more. So it can get pricey, particularly if your website is popular. But if you're making money off of your website, then it might make sense. The two managed hosting companies that I recommend are Bluehost and WP Engine. There's some other good ones out there. So just because I'm not recommending them, it doesn't mean that they're not good. It just means I haven't tested them enough to give it the Thomas stamp of approval. The final category of hosting is a VPS, or virtual private server, and I'll lump in dedicated servers here too, even though there's some differences between them, but the differences for you don't matter because I don't recommend this kind of hosting. This is useful when you want root access to your server, and there should be no reason for you as an author to need root access to your server. If someone is recommending a solution or a piece of software that requires that level of server access, don't use it, because that's going to be complicated to maintain and expensive in terms of time and labor, if for no other reason. There are other solutions that don't need that. You can run a robust e-commerce website on managed hosting. You don't need a VPS for that. There are times when you need more complexity, and if you're running an operation and you have more than 5 employees, and if you have an IT person on staff and that IT guy makes a good case for why you need a VPS, then maybe consider it, but otherwise you can ignore all of the VPS and dedicated server options at whatever web host you're looking at. One quick note on domains. A domain name is different from hosting. So a domain name is something .com or .org or whatever. So for instance, authormedia.com is the domain name that points to our main website where this podcast lives, and it's where our blog lives and everything else. Authormedia.social is a different domain name that points to our social network for authors. So those are different domains that point at completely different hosts. We have a different host for authormedia.social. That's hosted by circle.so, and I have an entire episode with about circle.so and how it works and how to grow an online community. Personally, I like to have my domains registered with a different company than what I use for hosting. This is more secure. It makes switching web hosts easier because I can just point to the domain at the new host if I want to move, and it saves me money. And it saves me quite a bit of money because I own a lot of domains. I own over 100 domains. And so even saving $1 or $2 per domain matters. And so I use and recommend Namecheap.com for domain registration. Now, some web hosts will offer to register your domain, and some will give you a free year of domain registration. But then once the domain starts to renew, it will be more expensive than if you went with Namecheap. So if you have just one domain, letting your web host double as your registrar will make things simpler. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's one less thing to keep track of, so it might make sense for you. But if you have multiple domains, or if you like to buy domains for each of your book titles, for instance, I think moving your domains to namecheap.com will have some real advantages. Now, I can't stress this enough. Never use a domain name company as a web host. So while a web hosting company can register your domain and it's okay, never use a domain name company as a web host. So while I love namecheap.com as my domain registrar, I would never use them to host my website. That's not what they're good at. Same for GoDaddy. GoDaddy is okay for domains. People like them for domains. I don't, but a lot of people do. So they're fine for domains, but they're a terrible web host. I get so many authors complaining to me about GoDaddy for their web hosting. I don't get a lot of complaints about GoDaddy's domain registration other than that they're expensive. Namecheap is still cheaper than GoDaddy. I've used Namecheap for like 15 or 20 years. A lot of these companies have been around for a long time, and I've been using them for a long time. I bought my first domain when I was like 12 or 13 years old. And I used GoDaddy early on, but not anymore. Not when I can avoid it. I hear more authors complain about GoDaddy than I do about Wix. And that's saying something, because authors complain about Wix quite a bit. The bottom line when it comes to web hosting is that there are hundreds of amazing WordPress web hosts out there. And just because I don't recommend one doesn't mean that it's bad, but there are a few I recommend that you avoid. Like I mentioned, GoDaddy, 1&1, Namecheap. Those are no good. The one that is the most popular among authors is Bluehost. I even set up an example author website using Bluehost. I have a whole course that walks you through how to build your own website using Bluehost and Divi. And it's an incredibly popular course. Bluehost is also who Joanna Penn recommends, and a bunch of other folks in the author space recommend Bluehost. But I should point out, Bluehost is not what I use. I pay the extra money to use WP Engine. I've been using WP Engine for over 10 years, and I've been very happy with them. If you want more help with your author website, I do recommend that you check out that free course, How to Build an Amazing Author Website. In this course, in the first part of the course, I build a website, and you can watch me do it. And hundreds of authors have gone on to build their own website, even when they didn't think they could. But then the course goes into how to make your existing website amazing. So if you already have a website, this course is still useful because it teaches you how to build your website in a way where visitors actually want to visit it. So if you have a website and it's not getting a lot of visits, you really should check out this course, and the course is free. It's supported by affiliate links. So I make various recommendations like for Bluehost and for Divi, and you can use my affiliate links if you want to, which will help support the course, but you don't have to. It's up to you. You're an adult and it's a free country. I also have some affiliate links in this episode. Some of what I recommended I have affiliate links for, but I don't have affiliate links for everything. So go to authormedia.com/425 to see if I have an affiliate link for the thing you want a link to. Our featured patron is Michelle Levine, author of InQuest, the AFV Defender, Book 4. The Defender heads across the galaxy to find out who or what is sending mysterious signals from beyond charted space. But this time, they've been partnered with the InQuest, the only ship in the fleet with a stranger reputation and record than the Defender. The notorious captain and her crew of rule breakers always manage to escape from the jaws of death and return in glory. Unfortunately, the ships sent on missions with them don't fare so well. So, will the AFV Defender survive? Find out by buying AFV Defender Book 4. Michelle Levine, thank you so much for being a supporter of the podcast. Thank you for your financial support that helps keep this podcast on the air. The Novel Marketing Podcast is a production of authormedia.com. Audio engineering is by William Umstadt. Blogification is by Shauna Lettler. And you can find the blog version of this episode at authormedia.com/425. I'm Thomas Umstadt Jr. saying thank you for listening and live long and prosper.